Hello, folks. This is 51. I figured that since what the game is really all about is grinding it out, whether it's in events or it's in stories or it's in arenas, I'd give sort of a basic tutorial of the game through the lens of the arena. I'm going to look at the T4 basic arena just because it's open and I hadn't started it yet. But the things that I'm going to tell you about being in the arena sort of apply regardless of what level arena you're doing. So, as a starter, you can see since I haven't done any fighting yet, I have a win streak of 0. My multiplier is 1. What that means is you want to use one of the lower level champs that you can for the particular arena that you're in. So if it's a 3 or 4-star arena, use your weakest 3 stars first, because that way you're not wasting your powder. Because with each fight that you win or round that you win, your multiplier goes up, which means you get more points. So you want to save your highest rated champs for fights after the 5th round, because then you're going to get the maximum points. But anyway, this is going to be a really long video, so feel free to skip around, feel free to cut through it. I'm going to give you sort of the basic overview for how I do arenas, which usually maximizes my time so that I don't end up having to restart because I find myself in fights that I can't handle. At this stage of the game, I have enough champs that there aren't a whole lot of fights that I can't handle. But the sort of the model that I follow, I think works in just about every level of arena. That's use the lower powered champs, not necessarily the lowest powered champs, but you can certainly do that until the 5th round. And then after the 5th round, or 5th and 6th round, use the weakest of the highest tier champs that you can use. So for example, in this arena, you can use any tier of champion that you want. I started by using my weakest 3-star champions, just because 2 and 1-star champions have so low of a rating that the points that you get aren't really great. But you could actually use them and it doesn't change the output. So first round is done. Using my weakest 3-star champs, I'm going to use some more weak 3-star champs. And while I'm sort of giving you the basics about arena, I'll also kind of walk you through what some of the champs are doing, because I know that there's a lot of new players and there's a lot of stuff about the game that they haven't figured out yet, haven't been told yet. So I don't want to be pedantic, but there are a lot of aspects to the game that people, sometimes even experienced players, never really paid attention to or didn't figure out. And trust me, there's a ton of stuff that I don't know, but I'm happy to share what I do know. So, as the fights start, you're actually fighting against the champs of other summoners. So you see there's the guy's name, there's his alliance name, Harunti. That will actually change throughout the course of the fight, not necessarily not just the name of your opponent, but after a certain number of fights, you're not actually fighting against other summoners' champions. If you do it right, you're actually going to be fighting against either Kang's team or Thanos' team. And basically, when it comes to getting through arena quickly and easily, you want to be fighting Thanos' team and Kang's team. They're much easier fights. They have no masteries. They can't parry you. Basically means that any normal opponent, an actual human being opponent, would try to maximize their masteries to make their characters as powerful as possible. When you're fighting against Kang's or Thanos' team, none of that's done. So if you look at the actual champs you're fighting, the rankings and the ratings don't even make sense. Like if you're fighting a 6-star, sometime it'll be a tier 5 6-star, but your rating is higher than theirs because it's got no masteries. But anyway, just finished that round, starting up another one. So arena basics, you can obviously move your champs around during that matchup phase to make sure you don't have any disadvantages. Sort of to maximize the likelihood that you can figure out a good combination, I try to make sure that every time I'm putting in champs for an arena round, I put in 3 different classes. Now, you could take a lot of time and try to figure out synergies and put in great, matchups of characters. I don't really bother. If I see a synergy that I know about when I'm picking champs, I'll put them in there. So for this, for example, I put Captain America in, and then I noticed in my champ lineup that I also have Winter Soldier. I know that if you put those two together, then there's some mild boosts for each. So might as well. But the fights are going to progress. There's going to be a lot of them, and this is going to be a long time. So I guess the thing that I can try to do is explain what's going on with some of these champs. It's probably going to be more interesting once we get to the stronger champs because, 3 stars aren't super interesting to start with, but they still function just the same as their higher level counterparts. All right, so round 3, multiplier goes up. Once the multiplier gets high enough, it starts making sense to use stronger champs. So instead of going to the weakest 3 stars, now I'm using my stronger 3 stars. It doesn't really matter. As long as you're not putting in the highest tier of champ that you can for that arena. So if I put in 5 stars now into this arena, I basically am messing up the sequence that you need to follow to make sure that you get Kang and Thanos' team as opponents. So sticking with the 3 stars all the way up until the 5th round. All right. For those of you who haven't messed with Wasp as a champ, as you can see, her heavies do ridiculously large amounts of damage, and the opponents are stunned while you're charging them. So that's pretty much the trick to using her. As you can see, my fighting style is aggressive but somewhat conservative. I try to parry as often as possible and try to dodge specials rather than just take a block. For the most part, until you've learned how to dodge specials from every opponent, most of the time you're going to be safer just to block against special attacks. It's going to reduce the damage by 90%, so you're probably going to survive it. I've been playing this game long enough, and I've fought each champion enough times that, for the most part, I can dodge almost all the specials. Do I screw up? Absolutely. I get hit by people that there's no reason why I get hit by them. I am not a perfect player. I accidentally let champs that I'm fighting against reach their power 3 and hit me with a 3-star special. Most of the time you can survive that and you can turn it around and you can keep going. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. Okay, round 4. Sticking with the 3 stars. Getting rid of disadvantages. Parry. Counter. As you can see, the points start stacking up pretty quick. For this particular arena, I have to go all the way up to 1.1 million to get the first T4 basic catalyst. But T4 basics are kind of the lifeblood of this game once you get up into the higher rankings, because every powerful 4-star, every single 5-star, and every 6-star need several T4 basics to be able to rank up. So you can kind of never have enough of them. Luckily, you can get 2 every week from this arena. You can also get them from monthly event quests. You can get some of them from story quests. And you can also get them pardon, from the Glory store. So when you're in an alliance and you do alliance quests, then at the end of each alliance quest season, you'll get your Glory rewards, and you can use those in the Glory store, and you can buy a significant number of T4 basic shards. So basically, in my alliance, we take it pretty easy for the level of champs that we have, but I can still buy in the Glory store without using any real money, just using Glory, at least 2 T4 basics every week, which, that's enough to rank up 1 5-star. So it's not bad. Okay, so now I'm at the 5th round. So see what I'm doing now, I'm going straight to the 5 stars, but I'm using my weakest 5 stars. So if I was doing the 3 and 4 star arenas, this would be when I switched to the 4 stars, but I would use my weakest ones for round 5. Miles is actually pretty good for countering the Wasp, because when she does her little evade shock thing, he can also evade it back half the time. He didn't that time. People ask all the time in global, is so-and-so a good champ? Is Howard the Duck a good champ? Is, Venom Pool a good champ? I certainly have my favorites, and you can tell by who I rank up and who I don't rank up, maybe who some of those are. But at the same time, my answer usually when people ask those questions is any champ can be a good champ. Every champ has their strengths. If you learn them and you like playing with them, then you can make do. I remember my first 5-star was Iron Fist, and people said, "Oh, that stinks, man. Iron Fist isn't any good." I used him to make it all the way through Act 4 before I started getting better champs. And I still enjoy using him today because I learned how he works, and he does a ton of damage if you use him right. And that kind of applies for everybody. So with Venom Pool, every champ has pros and cons. I'd say his pros, if you use his special 1, he can get a regeneration, and his special 2 causes a ton of bleed. So you can bleed out your opponents pretty easy with him. Okay, so still now for round 6, using the weakest 5-star champs that I can. You see those milestones are starting to stack up. I'm getting the full multiplier now, so that's 3 times. If I had any arena boosts, see the little green arrow up there, you can use those on your champs. I don't have any boosts for 5 stars, so I'm not using any here, but that would speed things up. So for me, to get all the way up to the 1.1 million I need, it's probably going to take about 20 fights, or 20 rounds of fighting, which is like, 45 minutes. That's why it's a grind. That's the unfortunate reality of the game. But there's side benefits to that. First of all, you're learning how to use all your champs. You're figuring out who you actually like to play with. Because there's certain champs that are very powerful, but I just don't like their playing style, so I don't use them. But also, you're getting exposed to a whole bunch of different champs as opponents. So you're learning how to dodge them. You're learning how to bait them out to make them use their special. So here I'm trying to bait Archangel into using his special 2. And so as I didn't want to get hit with his special 3, it worked. Now he's toast. And on top of that, you get battle chips for every one of these fights that you win. And the battle chips you can train in for arena crystals, and that's kind of the lifeblood of the game. That's how you get gold, that's how you get energy, and that's how you get units. Now you can spend money, and I've spent money, and everybody I know that's ever played this game has just about spent at least some money. But you can make a pretty significant amount of units every week just by doing arena and then cashing in your battle chips at the end. I mean, at this stage, with all the champs that I've got, I can easily pull in 1,000 units a week just from arena. bleeders. X23 and Gwenpool are both excellent bleed-causing champs, but if you're not getting hit like I'm not here, then you don't bleed. Okay, here is the important one. Now you're at round 7. At this stage, the opponents are going to be hard, so use your strongest champs on the highest tier that you can. This is what I do, at least. Pick the easiest fight, or if there's someone you know you don't like to fight, like I don't like to fight Korg, so I'm not going to fight him. You can see those champs, all 3 of them are stronger than mine. So this is the test. If you can get through this round, it gets much easier. So Domino is actually not the best champ to fight Omega Red with because she causes bleed, and when he's bleeding, he hurts you. But as long as you keep your distance, he's nothing much of a trouble. All right, so now you can see how Gwenpool can bleed people, which is a lot. Seven stacks. Yeah. And magic. And as I recall, I totally screw up this fight and almost end up dying for no good reason because this is not a difficult fight. With magic, pretty much you want to try to get up to special 2 because once you do, the fight's usually over if you don't screw up like that. Because when you hit somebody with the special 2, they're drained and then they are going to be cut off from power gain for a little while. So you can pretty much end the fight very shortly thereafter. And you also steal power when you use it. So then she gets to hit you again. But I still salvaged it, pulled it out. And so basically you just rinse and repeat. You keep using your strongest champs, but you can see now the opponents I'm fighting are equal to or weaker than me, and they're on Kang's team. So these fights are now much, much easier than the one that I just did because Kang's team has no masteries, and they often aren't duped. You know, a lot of real players won't put the resources to rank up champs that they haven't duplicated, except for certain exceptions, because there's certain champs that are actually better when they're not duped. But when you're fighting against Kang's team or Thanos' team, there's kind of no rhyme or reason. Sometimes they'll be duped, sometimes they won't, but all of them have no masteries, which means they're a much easier opponents. Okay, so Havoc, I actually just ranked him up, so I'm just still learning how he really works. But his specials do ridiculous amounts of damage, especially his special 2. But since I'm fighting Gwenpool, she can't die from specials, no matter how much damage. So you have to get in at least one more lick to finish her off. Aegon. Until he's duped, he's useless. But once he is duped, he is very, very good. His trick, though, is you just like Star-Lord, you need to rack up consecutive hits, meaning you need to have unbroken chains of hits, or you need to work in heavy attacks because those will put in a little blocker which allows you to take hits and not lose your hit count. But as his hit count goes up, all of his abilities get higher. His block penetration gets better, his attack gets better, his critical damage gets better. So when you get him up to 50, 60, 100, then he's pretty unstoppable. And there's Iron Fist. Disadvantages. Venom is a beast. They buffed him a few months ago, and he is now one of the best champs in the game, in my opinion. Um, he was like one of my first strong 3 stars back when I was really starting out the game, and he just wasn't all that great. But the way they've changed him, he is a force in this game. And as far as Alliance Quest, he's one of the best because when you come up against people who evade, especially Spider-Verse champs, the evade does not work against Venom, so he can just wail on you. And then even people who do auto block, like Iron Man Infinity War, the auto block doesn't work after they get down below 18% health because Venom gets True Strike. Okay, my old friend Iron Fist. He's actually really good for fighting against Medusa because she is hard because after she gets her 3 Furies, she has that auto block, the Living Strands. Well, with Iron Fist, every time he uses a heavy, he takes away the Fury. He nullifies. But on top of that, even when she's got her Living Strands, your first hit, she can't block on. It's the second hit. So basically, you just take pot shots at her until you've got her down, or you hit her while she's blocking. Night Thrasher. I used to think he was terrible, but I was proven wrong. He is a little tricky, though, to actually make him really powerful. And I don't even think I use any of the tricks here in this fight. Pretty much, unless you follow a very specific sequence of how to hit your opponents, then Night Thrasher is just average. He is immune to Incinerate, which is handy. His skateboard hits can't be evaded, which is nice. But generally, he doesn't do a ton of damage in his basic attacks. He's pretty weak compared to other champs of his rating. But, so he just hit the special one. See how Juggernaut is incinerated? The trick with Night Thrasher, if I had actually done it properly, is while Juggy is incinerated, you hit him with heavies. And there's a percentage chance that goes up with the SIG level of taunting your opponent if you hit them with heavies while they're under those effects. Once the taunt is on, then every hit of Night Thrasher makes his attack rating go up permanently for the rest of the fight until he gets knocked down up to 10. So once you've taunted your opponent, you can get 10 Furies very quickly, and then his attack rating is basically just gone up by 2,000. So then he becomes pretty solid. Drax is always fun, even against non-bleeding opponents. Omega Red is actually kind of tricky to use properly, but he can be incredibly effective. Pretty much anybody being close to him is harmed after 10 of those death spores stack up. The trick with him, get some death spores stacked up and then hit with a heavy, and then they don't fade away. And then if he activates his special 2 or he starts to bleed, then the death spores can go up to 30, and then they're doing so much damage that almost nobody can survive. And it affects even poison immune folks, which is kind of handy. See here, I'm checking to see if I have any arena boost. If they did, the you'll use items button wouldn't have been grayed out. But I don't have any. I think I used them all up during the item use event last week. As you can see, I'm still fighting Thanos' team now that even though I'm a few rounds in. As long as you keep using your top champs, you'll stay fighting Thanos and Kang's team, usually until about the 15th round. That's when you finally start fighting against real opponents or summoner opponents again. But you want to try to keep that streak up as long as you can because, like I said before, Kang and Thanos' team are always easier than other players. Here's Void. I'm trying to bait out his special here, but I'm impatient, so I'll probably end up getting hit with a special 3. Yep. Luckily, Void's pretty tough. Okay, I'm halfway there. I'm halfway up to the 1.1 million that I need. All right. If you don't know why Archangel is so good, here's why. Hit with a heavy, they bleed. Then you block, they're poisoned. Then you bleed them again, and they get neurotoxin. Neurotoxin does a heap of damage, lasts a long time, and it prevents people from evading, from healing, from all sorts of stuff. So pretty much once the neurotoxin is put on your opponent, the fight's over. And old Hyperion, the Superman knockoff. Trick with him, hit with heavy, stack up Furies. I don't do a great job of it here. I only got 2 on. I think I get 1 more in. There we go. Now we're up to 5. Hit with the special 3. Fight will basically be over. So with 5 Furies, he does a heap of damage. As far as masteries goes, there's lots of different setups that you can use, and there's lots of really nice videos out there and guides about how best to set up your masteries for the goals that you want to achieve in the game. I do not have sort of the maximum offense type of masteries, which people call suicides. In a moment, I think I'll be fighting some champs that actually do have the suicides, and then I'll explain a little bit more about that. But that's why when I'm fighting, at the start of each fight, I don't have poison or bleed applied. And then also, I don't have recoil show up every time I use a special. Those are all the side effects of some offensive masteries that make your damage output go way, way up. But there's a cost. So we'll get there in a bit. We got the movie rematch. Killmonger versus Black Panther. And just like in the movie, Killmonger kicks his tail. For the longest time in this game, Spider-Gwen was one of the worst champs by far. She was useless. She didn't have the evades that she has now, and her special one wasn't even an offensive special. It basically just changed her fighting stance, which is not helpful. Now, after the buff, her specials are quite good. Her special one does a significant amount of damage, but she also can paralyze and innervate, which means block you from gaining power. So she's become a significantly better champion. And then Captain Sparkles, the new Captain Marvel. Basic trick with her is block and parry until you build up some charges. You go binary, and then her damage output goes through the roof. So right now I'm only at 3. I could just sit here and try to parry him over and over and over, but I'm impatient, so I still just go and fight for a while. But see, now it says binary ready. I think I fail to bait out Winter Soldier here, and I get hit with a special 3. But luckily, she's pretty tough. And then she'll go binary, and the fight will be over. Yep, now she's binary. Goodbye, Winter Soldier. Okay, done with 13 rounds. Still sticking against Thanos and Kang for now. Like I said, you want to try to keep that streak alive as long as you can. So go with the strongest champs because you drop down into the lower tiers and you'll drop out of those fights and you'll start having to fight against other summoners. And sometimes those fights can be very, very difficult, kind of like Fight 7 was. All right, so Mordo's got some pluses and some minuses. What I like to do, because I'm impatient, is charge up using his heavy. And he gains Furies for that up to a total of 10 stacks. And with 10 stacks of Fury, he does a lot of damage. And then the fight ends pretty quickly, usually after that, as you can see. All right, Proxima. She has her missions, and you can see underneath her life bar which mission she got. And so, number one mission means she needs to parry. You can also parry things like Cyclops' beam there. But once you've parried 5 times, well, then it turns into a permanent fury. And it's a strong one, too. So then after that, the fight goes very quickly after you've completed one mission. Now, if I was fighting somebody really powerful, I would try to complete the second mission and then the third mission, and maybe even the fourth if I had a synergy up with Corvus Glaive. All right, so I don't do a good job of showing off Sabretooth, but here's how Sabretooth gets good. Once you get 10 hits, he gets a Fury. If you then use a special, the Fury becomes permanent. Or if you can't use the special, if you just pull back and stand there, not blocking, for like a full second, then it'll also turn it into a permanent buff. But he can get up to 5 of those buffs, and after 2 or 3, he does a lot of damage. So a lot of people don't like Sabretooth. I think he's pretty solid. He could be better, but if once he's got 3 or 4 Furies under his belt, and he can carry them fight to fight if you're doing events or quests. So, get into the first fight, stack up 2 or 3 of those, and every other fight after that gets pretty easy. And he kind of has a slow heal ability where he's just healing the whole time. All right, so I think this is my last fight against the pure AI Thanos or Kang's team opponents. Quake, if you learn how to use Quake, she can wreck the whole game. I'm not a Quake master. I've seen some Quake masters, and it's pretty dang impressive. But basically, with the trick with Quake, you just hit them. You hold your heavy attack, and it puts those charges, those aftershock charges, on your opponent. Just stack as many as you can, and then their first swing at you is always going to miss. So, heavy, dodge, then block. Trying to bait out his special too. And I didn't, so now I'm just going to have to hit him as fast as I can. Hope he doesn't hit me with the special 3. And I got lucky. All right, Loki. Loki can be super handy against certain opponents. For the most part, he's not very many people's favorite champ. He basically gets a free special 1 all the time because he's always charging up power up to special 1. And then if you pair him up with his brother, the Thor Ragnarok, then it'll charge all the way up to special 2. And it does it pretty quick, too. So he gets a lot of specials off. When you're fighting opponents that have lots of buffs, like a Groot or like Angela, Loki just destroys them because use that first special one and steal all their buffs, and then the buffs stay on Loki for a full 7 seconds. So if you're fighting Wolverine, you steal his regeneration. Your regeneration on Loki will last longer than the one on Wolverine. So that's pretty handy. And then if your opponent is more damaged than you are, then Loki's special 2 does a flat percentage of life type of damage. I think it does 7%. So it doesn't matter who you're fighting. You're fighting on, Labyrinth of Legends, a guy with huge amounts of hit points. If you've got him down below a certain percentage and you hit him with Loki's special 2, it does 7% of that. And that can be, hundreds of thousands of damage. So he has his uses. Here's Sparky, who's a big fan favorite. I'm not great with him, and I personally don't like his fighting style, so I never really put the resources into him. I appreciate that he's a good champ and that he's got a lot of pluses going for him. But basically the trick is with him, you try to evade like that, to dodge hits as much as possible, and then you build up those poise charges. See the little 3 spider? Once you've got those poise charges up, his damage output, his critical rate, his critical damage all goes up. So you can stack up 8 or 9 of those, then he's doing just huge damage. Personally, I'm not good at it, so I don't do it. All right, so now I actually have to fight some real people, or at least the real people's champions. Round 15. Yep, see, no more Thanos or Kang's team. Morningstar is pretty solid. It's nice that her opponents start bleeding every time they hit her. She's kind of got a permanent spike armor buff on her. What she's really great for is her special 2. It takes off any buffs that your opponent has, and it does a monster amount of damage for each one that's removed. So if you fight somebody that's got, you're fighting Howard the Duck with 9 armor ups, you hit him with that special 2, the fight's over. It doesn't matter how strong. It'll do like 50, 60,000 damage if you pull enough buffs off of your opponent. All right, so we've got Gladiator Hulk. The trick with him is try to get your hits in as quickly as possible to build up the crowd frenzy, because then he becomes unstoppable. And as you saw there, he walked right into Iron Man's special 2, and it didn't even phase him because the crowd frenzy was at 100. All right, Doc Ock. I like Doc Ock because he's really good at intercepting, because he's got such a long reach with his attack. So with him, it's kind of dodge back, then attack quickly. And most fights using him are pretty quick. Also, if you hit with the heavy, it tends to put on a power lock on your opponent. As I recall, this opponent coming up has full suicide masteries on, which means that their hits do a huge amount of damage. Their damage output is probably 50 or 60% higher than the standard because of those masteries. It makes their ratings go up on each of their champs as well. But there's a drawback. In every fight, they start off bleeding, poisoned, and then every time they use a special, it hurts them. So it's great for, really powerful opponents in like war or on, high level story quests or on the variant quest, things like that, but not great for arena in my opinion. But everybody has their own style. I'm a little more conservative. I just want to make sure that my guys survive long enough to win the fight. Iron Man Infinity War, great war defender because his auto block is super annoying. His specials are unblockable, which is also super annoying to fight against. But when you're using him, that's pretty handy. You hit him with special 1, you put that shock on, and then every one of his little blast attacks is a power drain. So you don't have to worry about trying to bait out specials. You can just drain them whenever they start getting close to the special 3. Here's a major disadvantage for this guy because he has the suicides on, is that when you start the fight bleeding, and you're fighting Carnage, then all of Carnage's attacks go up. His chance to put more bleeds on you goes through the roof. And so that fight was over basically before it started, even though Sparky is a good, sometimes a hard opponent to fight against, not when he's bleeding and you're fighting Carnage. Get a little advantage there while I can. Sentinel, my normal style is just parry and heavy, puts a big shock buff, a debuff on your opponent. And then once you get up to special 2, hit him with that because the incinerate damage is really strong. But because this is Black Panther Civil War, parrying him can often end up getting you hit because he'll stun you, and then he gets a free special like that. So instead, I just go straight for the special 2, incinerate, stack up, fight's over. Boom, bye. Coming up to the 1,000,000 mark. Medusa, obviously super handy against robots like Vision and Ultron, but also a fantastic war defender because her Living Strands auto block is pretty darn annoying, and there's only a few champs that can counter it well. Karnak. Oh, Karnak. Very unpopular champ from most people that I talk to. He does decent base damage. His specials kind of stink, but his special 1 does give him True Strike, so when you're fighting against people with evade or auto block, at least you can ignore that. He's pretty good at dodging, I find. I try to say nice things about people. So that's what I'll say about Karnak. And his special 2 does a fair amount of damage. All right, I think this is the last fight coming up here to get me up to my first T4 catalyst, and then that'll be the end of the video. But hopefully this guy gave you a flavor of what arena is all about, and this kind of model follows for every one of the arenas. If you're doing the 2 and 3 star arena, start off with your weak 2 stars. Once you get to the 5th fight, go with your weak 3 stars. And then after starting with fight 7, use your strongest 3 stars until you run out, or until you run into a fight that you can't handle, and then you just start over. But that's how you hit your milestones, and that's how you can get lots of battle chips. And especially when you're first early in the game, the thresholds for actually winning champs and being on the top of the leaderboard are much lower when you're a beginner. So you can actually win the champs from the arenas when you're first starting off, if you're willing to put in some time. At this stage of the game, for me, if I was going to try to actually win a 5-star champ in the arena, I'd need sometimes 20, 30 million points, which I frankly don't have the patience for anymore. But I will do this kind of fight just to get my T4 basics. And Rogue stealing some life. And I think Hela is the last fight. Hela's pretty solid too. People forget or don't know how to use her. So she's got those little soul charges. So with a few hits, that stacks up to over 100. Once you're over 100, you're pretty much good. Then you hit with a heavy, and it puts a serious fury buff on her. And it'll last until you run out of those soul charges. So she can stack up 3 or 4 furies and just do crazy damage. Anyway, there we go. There's 1.1 million. I can collect my rewards. And there's my T4 basic. That's the end of that. Thanks. Let me know if you have any questions.